Welcome to MMA Fancast. I am honored to welcome back onto the show for the second time, Gunner, the Real McCoy, Spain. Gunner, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Luke, how's it going? It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's always going well anytime I can do one of these interviews, particularly when I can interview you. You came on the show right after your last amateur fight. You're 6-0 as an amateur in MMA. And you're definitely a rising star. Tapology has you ranked #1 in welterweight amateur MMA in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And then also out of 300 fighters in all of the Northeast United States area, which is from Maine down to North or South Carolina, you're #3. But you're not actually on today to talk about your amateur career. You're on today to talk about your pro career, because on March 3rd, which isn't too far away, you're making your pro debut at the Tropicana Casino for Ring of Combat. And so let's talk a little bit before we get to your pro debut fight, because that's obviously exciting. Let's talk about what's been going on with you after your last MMA fight. What kind of propelled you to go pro, and how's the last several months been since August, since your last fight?
Yes, sir. So it's I took a week off and went right back to training. And that's how we do things. Just put your head back in the dirt and keep grinding. It's the only way to go about it. Since my last fight, I had joined John Marquez MMA and Daniel Gracie BJJ for my last fight. And just being with that team has been fantastic, really. Coach John and everybody there has brought me in real tight. It's been a close family. It felt like family since day one. They've been putting me through the paces, so after the last fight, we were contemplating whether to go pro or if I should stay amateur, get a couple more amateur fights. And with having trouble getting or locking up another amateur fight, and the belief in myself and the belief the coaches had in me, we all agreed that we think it's time and they think I'm ready to go pro. So that's how we came to the conclusion that this next fight, it's time for the big leagues. Let's make it real deal. Let's earn some money. Let's do something fun. Get a legacy going.
Well, and when you talk about a legacy, you are 21 or 22, right? You're very young. How old will you be at the night that you go pro?
I'm 21. I turned 21 September 5th.
Okay, so you're still a young 21.
Yeah, 5 months, 5.5.
Wow. So you had all of I think we actually talked about this on the last time on, that you had all of your amateur fights before you were 21. That's right, because your last amateur fight was in August. You turned 21 September 5th. It's coming back to me now. So, wow, that's incredible. So let's just talk. Obviously, we'll get to the pro debut, but what's it like being the fact that you in many ways are the prototypical young MMA fighter that has all the skills? The UFC is in its 30th year. MMA was created before the UFC. I'm not trying to give them all of the credit, but this sport is still kind of young. You're 21 years old. You'll be going pro at 21. I believe, if my brain's right, John Jones won the belt as the youngest UFC champion. I think he was 24. He might have been a very old 23 or very young 24. So what's it like to be at the point in your career where at 21, you'll be taking your first fight, a pro fight? How aware are you at sort of the uniqueness that your age makes you when you talk about a legacy that you're going to potentially have a decade, 2 decades in the fight industry?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I was born and raised doing this. This is what I've always wanted to do. I want to leave something behind, put my name in the stone. I think, honestly, nowadays, if you're not the well-rounded MMA fighter, like with the game evolving, like you're saying, like you need to be, you're going to be left in the dirt. You're going to be left behind. Like you're not seeing any guys that are just one suited anymore, that are excelling anymore. My one buddy, my training partner, Itzo, Friday night, fought for the PFL, and he fought the 5-time BJJ world champion, and he beat him. And you can't be a one-sided guy anymore. I mean, he looked good. It was a good fight. It was a grueling fight, but as we see the newer guys coming up, you got to be good at everything. And if you're not, you're going to be left behind. And you know, I even think I might be behind the steps a little bit. I don't know how old that kid is now in the UFC, but he's
Oh,
like
yes.
17 or 18 years old, and
Yeah.
he's in the UFC. I think that kid's really a trendsetter to really show up for all the young guys like me and all the kids around our age that are trying to do this thing, put everybody on the map for the young kids, and show them that the old guys don't run it anymore. That we're here and we can bang too. Like we're ready to go. And you know, I hope I can get a good 10 years in me. Maybe less, maybe more. Who knows? I mean, I want to, if I could do quickly, I'm all about exponential growth. If I can hop on the swing, hop on a quick run up and get into the UFC or in the Bellator or one championship PFL as fast as I can and grab a belt as young as I can, that'd be great. I mean, I don't think there's no stop. Why stop when you're hot? Just keep running.
Well, it's great to see that mindset. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's kind of a couple big things that have come off the Dana White Contender Series. I think it's in its fifth or sixth season, and the big one was Hill, who just beat Teixeira, was the first champion, which is a huge deal. I remember when Tough, the Ultimate Fighter champion to become a title champ, I believe, was off season 2, and that was Sugar Rashad Evans. I believe he was the first Tough champion to become a champion off of Tough, and then of course others have followed suit. But yeah, so Hill was the first off the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, and then you're mentioning the gentleman who's escaping our brain, but he just made his debut as I think just under 18 or just over 18 in the UFC. And you're right, he already had several pro fights prior to obviously going to the UFC. So it's really exciting. One thing I guess to bring up is, when did you start training age-wise with the mindset that you were going to put your skills into MMA?
Sure. So strictly MMA wise, so I started training when I was 4, but that was practically pretty much karate, and then I switched right to Muay Thai. It was kind of like a karate class, but it was a Muay Thai gym. So the younger kids kind of did karate stuff, and then when you're grown enough or old enough, they switch you to Muay Thai. But I pretty much switched right to Muay Thai right away as well. I was like 5 years old. And then about 8 years old, I started doing boxing, and then started like the school had jujitsu, and I did a little jujitsu. I probably at the time I watched UFC fights. I liked to like watch them with my dad, and my dad would always watch them every weekend or whenever it was. It probably wasn't as prominent saying like, oh, I'm definitely gonna be an MMA fighter, but probably like 8th grade year going into like high school when I started actually training with professional UFC fighters like at the gym. That's when I was like, all right, well, so back when I was training over at Ricardo Almeida and with Nick Catone, Mark Henry, funny story, we were walking out of the gym and I was like 13 or 14 years old or whatever, like after a hard sparring day. And he like came over to me and asked me, he was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? This isn't an easy lifestyle. This isn't an easy game. And I don't know, I just looked him right in the eyes as a little kid and I said, yeah, this is it. This is what I love. This is I want to do this every day. I want to fight. So I guess from that point on, it's just dedicated my life to being the best MMA fighter I can be.
Well, and it's certainly shown that your focus and determination really is paying off to be making your pro debut at just over 21, to be 6-0 as an amateur, a perfect record. And there were a couple other fights I saw on Tapology that obviously fell through. That happens a ton in amateur. It happens still at the pro level. We all know Habib and Tony's four match fights that never happened, but it happens less at the pro level because there's contracts and money involved. I think the reason why I asked you that question is because when you go all the way back to Randy the Natural Couture, who debuted in the UFC at 34 years old, he already had a successful wrestling, successful boxing. We remember all types, even DC, who became 2-time champ. And I think that's impressive. Heavyweight and light heavyweight, he was already at the top of his game in wrestling, and that's all great. But I think what we've seen now is people like you show that if you put 20, 25 years into just BJJ or just wrestling, that's great. But then by the time you make your transition to MMA, some of the people like you that have been training all the disciplines very young up are kind of already there. And so it's really exciting. I think those more established, like you mentioned, more established world champs from other martial arts will still transition to MMA. We'll still see it. Bo Nichols is about ready. Bo Nichols about ready to make his official debut in the UFC. And he was obviously a super high level wrestler. So it'll still happen. But what do you think is the main advantage to you and others who were already at pro level UFC fight caliber gyms at, pre-teens? What do you think the advantage is to that?
Just based off knowledge. We get in there, and I was young. When you're younger, you absorb things better, you learn, you understand, and just their mentality and their knowledge. They worked hard and they knew what they were doing and they were good at it. Just being able to be in that room I was in the room with Ebson Barbosa, Frankie Edgar, Eddie Alvarez, like tons of different fighters, Paul Felder, just the top of the line fighters at the time, and still some of the top of the line fighters. And just being able to watch them, talk to them, interact with them, and spar with them was next level. Like you don't get that kind of work just out of nowhere. Those guys are the best in the world for a reason. And if they can teach you one little thing that changes your game, that can win you a fight or protect you when you're down, whatever it may be, it can save you in a fight, or you can end a fight either way with one little tweak or one little thing that they teach you that took you 5 minutes to learn, and you wouldn't have learned it anywhere else. But they know it because they've been there, they've done it, they put themselves through the paces, and they understand what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is really the knowledge of experience and what that gives to you. If you can download, I think a lot of older fighters, we were talking about Glover, who just retired at 43, if he could download the 20 years of fight experience into himself when he was 18 or 19, his career, it was already incredible, but his career would probably even be more incredible. I know Cowboy Cerrone talked about that later in his career when he started picking up losses. He had better fight IQ, but his body was wearing down. So I think it really is fantastic when you've got all of those champions and those high caliber guys giving back to somebody like you. At the time, you weren't even a teenager. You're able to pick that up and already be fighting like a more seasoned professional, which obviously is the IQ and then also your physical capabilities. Let's talk about the fact that your pro debut fight is going to be for Ring of Combat, which is a big known regional. They fight out of a lot, but primarily Tropicana Casino. So it's going to be a big venue, a lot of pressure. You're also fighting a guy who's 1-1 in his pro career, which means he has 2 pro fights to your 0 pro fights. What's it like to immediately be testing yourself as far as somebody who's not an 0-0 debut? Was that intentional? You've talked about kind of wanting to leapfrog and move as quickly as possible to a non-regional stage, to one of the major 5 promotions. So what led you to pick Chris Guerrilla, wherever we say his last name? Best wishes, of course, and how I said his last name, but he's 1-1 and actually coming off a win. He dropped his debut fight as a pro, and then it's coming off win. So what made you pick him, and how'd that come together? And how excited are you to take on a pro who's already has 2 pro fights compared to your 0?
Yeah. So first off, thank you, Chris, for taking the fight. I mean, it's gonna be a good fight. I think, you can look at the tapology, say whatever you want to say, but obviously I'm going in there with a victory mindset. And I don't think him being 1-1 really crossed my mind. If anything, he's 1-1. It shows that he's beatable to me. I'm fresh. I'm 0-0 now. Like, if you look back at my record, I'm 6-0. That I don't try to let expectations or anything hang over me. I don't try to keep like a weight on myself. Going in there, I'm gonna do what I know how to do. I trained hard. I know it's gonna happen. I'm gonna fight my fight, and he can try and do whatever he wants to do. But we watch the video, we watch everything we can find on him, and we're going in there with our game plan. I don't have any what am I trying to say? The word I'm looking for, I can't find at the moment, but I'm not worried about going in and fighting a guy that's 1-on-1 or that already has pro stuff behind him. I train every day like a pro fighter. I don't go into the gym and go, all right, today's amateur day, let's do amateur stuff. Like I go into the gym, we throw knees, we throw head kicks, we throw elbows. We don't train like we're training for a random fight. We train like we're fighters. So it's not like the only time I was held back was when I was forced to be held back. Now when I can let everything go, you're gonna see the whole game now. There's no stopping me now. The only person that was holding me back before was the league.
Sure.
Now you're gonna get the whole gunner, the whole Real McCoy. I mean, that's it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense for people that may not be fully aware. Each state athletic commissioner has a different rule set for amateurs. And when you're fighting between, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, wherever you fight, every state's different. It can get kind of confusing. Sometimes the length of rounds is different. The rule set changes. Pennsylvania has a few more things than New Jersey, but they all have rule sets. To your point, they all outlaw things that are very legal in pro. We're certainly not talking about anything that you wouldn't already be familiar with at a pro level. So it's very exciting. Out of all the pro level skills, so that's full ground and pound with elbows and punches on the ground, full head kicks, because some states outlaw head kicks in amateurs, and then obviously knees to the face, elbows to the face. What do you think as a skill set are you most excited? Not from a game plan, because I don't want you to give that away, but what are you most excited to kind of have on the table as a pro?
Probably, ooh, I love so with my extensive Muay Thai background,
Sure.
um, we used to throw a lot of elbows, and then I had to stop on the feet and on the ground. So with Ring of Combat, you're actually still not allowed to throw elbows to the face
Okay.
on the ground.
Mhm.
But elbows and uh, kicks, elbows were a big part of the game that I haven't been able to use, and
Mhm.
you're definitely going to see me throwing some elbows out there. Um, not to not to say anything about what's going to happen out in the cage or what I'm planning on doing, but you're definitely going to see some elbows somewhere.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is fun. I don't know if you know the name Tom Kaiser. He's 1-0 as a 170 pounder. So he's in your weight class fights out of Morgantown, West Virginia. I got to see him fight as both an amateur and a pro debuter. And
Okay.
he came on the show a couple times, just like you are.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he was really looking forward to throwing the elbows. And then in his pro debut, he had an incredible elbow knockout. And then he came back on the show to kind of talk about how, just like you, he was always saying that as an amateur, he was always feeling like he had to edit what he would do. And as a pro, it felt like a weight off his shoulders to be able to throw everything. And then, of course, the fact that he predicted wanting to use elbows more, and then he knocked his opponent out standing up against the cage with an elbow. It was kind of is sort of the perfect tie into how rule sets do affect fights. So whether or not your first pro fight showcases your elbows or not, I know what you're saying is the elbows from your Muay Thai background is really gonna just complement your skill set.
Yeah. And I like that foreshadowing. I like how a little bit of what might happen in my fight coming up. But one correction,
Sure.
I'm actually, my stature. I fought
Mm,
6 dudes, and they're all big dudes. I'm 5'9",
mm,
170 as weight. But this fight coming up, my pro debut, I'm going to 55.
okay.
This fight's at 155.
Well, I was bringing up Tom Kaiser to see if you'd maybe call him out, but no, just kidding. I did see that your opponent on Tapology. It's always kind of hard to know. On Tapology, your opponent's last fight was at 155.
Mhm.
So I just assumed incorrectly, which is why you never assume. I just assumed that for whatever reason he was bumping up to 170. So you've had 7 months after your last fight. You mentioned your stature. So obviously, I think 55. Was that kind of always the game plan?
Yeah.
In other words, stay healthy and big when you're an amateur and then slim to 55. Was that your game plan all along?
100%.
Sure.
As an amateur, the rule sets are a little lighter on you, so you can't really get as injured theoretically.
Mhm.
But there was, I was doing it for the game. I was doing it for the love of the sport. So there was no point to do a pro cut You know, you're not, there's no, nothing, there's no benefits outside of experience of doing the amateur fights and just being in there and grinding and pounding, um, other than just the experience. So I walk around a little bit heavier than 170 normally. So making 170 really wasn't a big major cut, couple, 10 pounds maybe. But now I'm going pro. Now it's serious. This is a job. This isn't play. We're not playing around anymore. So uh we're making the 55 cut, and I think it was always in the game plan. We were probably trying to do something different, maybe like another amateur fight at 65 or 60 or something, but it just wasn't working out. Nobody wanted to take the fight, so we just said, let's go pro. Like I said, let's do it. Everyone believed, I believed, the coaches believed. So we made the transition. We've been working hard. We're going to drop down to 55, and if you're interested, the weight cut's going good. So don't worry about that.
Well, yeah, certainly. I hate making conversations. I know in your pro career, you'll probably have plenty of conversations. That's like the go-to interview question about how the weight cut's going. I try to stay away from that because sometimes weight cuts are easier than others. And the last thing you want is a fighter admitting that it's going hard, and then the opponent thinks that's a weakness and all that stuff. I think what you have said, which is really important. I remember having you on for the first time back in August. You're very intentional because you're coached right. Your mindset's right. And obviously the weight cut is part of being a pro. My own 2 cents, I think it's always smart at the amateur level, not to be like fighting way up, but I think it's smart at the amateur level to not put somebody under the same intense pressure they'd be under as pro. I've seen, people cutting weight in their first debut and they cut 30 or 40 pounds and they just look terrible and they perform terribly. And I mean, that would be a lot to do. We've seen Cody Garbrandt struggle with cutting down, and some of his going from 35 to 25. That was not a great idea. And so, yeah, I think it makes perfect sense that when you're a pro, that becomes part of the focus. And you've always been training, but you're also able to give the dedication it takes. And at your stature, I think 55 obviously makes sense. You probably remember, you mentioned Frankie Edgar way back in the day. That was when you were working with him. That would have been back when he was fighting at 55 as the pro champion before there were any classes lower, and he ended up getting wins and fighting for the belt at 35. So it really shows that the pro mindset, you can do a lot more with it. So thanks for letting me know that it's a 55. I think that makes absolute perfect sense. Do you think you'll have the kind of the more even strength to size now that you're at 55? Because you mentioned at 70 everybody was bigger, which was probably great because it forced you to kind of push yourself, which is what you want. So what do you think now being at 55?
Yeah. So the guys at 70, they were bigger. I wouldn't say much of them were much stronger than me. Physically, I felt like I could handle myself with all the dudes I fought. They were all pretty big and pretty strong, but I mean, none of them were really able to get their hands on me, keep me down, do anything they wanted to. So I think at 55, with my size, my array of skills from striking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, it all kind of works together. I mean, I feel great right now. At the weight I'm at right now, I've been sparring, I've been wrestling, I've been doing everything phenomenally, and healing's been better. I've been healing quicker. So I think this is the right weight class for me, and I feel good. You reiterate your question one more time. What did you say? Did I answer?
You already answered it, sir.
Okay.
Because I was talking about the kind of the strength and size, and you mentioned that size wise, the people will be a little bit more, your size,
Yeah,
but strength.
I'm strong here.
But you've already felt strong at 70,
I
which
felt
is
strong
probably
at
another
70.
good thing to have experienced, because we've seen that a lot in any weight specific sport, whether it's wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, obviously MMA. Size and weight are 2 different things. Like sometimes people are stronger at a smaller weight, or sometimes people are stronger at a bigger weight. I think of Anthony Rumble Johnson, may he rest in peace. That was so tragic how he died. But he's a great example. He was stronger at a bigger weight, and he was killing himself to get smaller. But we also know sometimes people are stronger at a smaller weight because that's better for their frame. So makes perfect sense, and I appreciate your detailed response. I'm assuming you're going to have a pretty big turnout. What would you say for the friends and family and fans as a motivation to come out? I mean, I think Atlantic City is fun. The Tropicana is a great casino. Kind of what would you tell them to expect out of you, because you are a performer, you are an entertainer. This is your job. So what can you kind of give to them as far as motivation? I know you already have a big following. Being a 6-0 amateur means you've built up a fandom throughout your amateur career.
You know, they should expect my best every time. That's what they're always getting. They're not getting anything less than the best. I'm going out there every single time, giving 110% effort, and I'm just gonna be a dog on a bone. Like I'm going after it every round. You're in there with me for 3 rounds for 5 minutes. You're getting me all 5 minutes every single time. There ain't gonna be no stops, no breaks. You're gonna see a good fight. The pressure is gonna be on, and we're gonna make something happen. Thank you to everybody that does come out. I know my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, they're a big help. I couldn't do this without them. My coaches, every coach I've ever had, the coaches I have now, without them, I wouldn't be the caliber of man and fighter that I am today. And thank you to my opponent for taking the fight.
Well, and thank you, since you're doing your thank you list, which is always, I think, very important to keep that in the forefront of your career and of your mindset. And you always have been very gracious, and that's important. But thank you to coming on the show. I think I started following you at sort of the perfect time. You ending your amateur career, starting your pro career. You've got a lot of excitement behind you. You're a very exciting guy to interview. You've got the whole. I love bringing up Donald Cowboy Cerrone, but you've got a little bit of the cowboy era. You're wearing the hat. You got the guitar on the wall with the two cowboy hats behind you. So it's kind of great to see your personality, and that'll develop. I thank you for coming on the show. I can't wait to have you back on the show to talk through your fight. You mentioned the 5 minutes. And so even though we're wrapping up, and I usually just say thanks and wrap up at this point, I wanted to bring this up. What do you think it's like to have those extra few minutes? Because I know in most of your fights, it's been 3-3. So what's it like to know that you have an extra 6 minutes total, which is as an amateur, that's an entire amateur 3 2-minute. Yeah. Now it's added on. So what's that like? You mentioned you're willing to go a full 3-5. So I just wanted to throw that on to you. What do you think about that extra 6 minutes?
Yeah, I think it gives you a lot more time to set up a lot more towards the end of the fight. I mean, obviously you want to go in there and win the fight as fast as you can, or whatever happens, something like that. That's the game plan. Get in, get out, whatever. That's what you hope for. Whatever, maybe not, I don't know. But
Sure.
the extra 2 minutes just allows you to get in there, set things up, understand your opponent, see what they're doing, get a good grasp of how they're actually using the cage and what strikes they're throwing, where they're at, like what they're doing at what part of the cage. And I think that's the next level as being a pro, understanding that fight IQ, like of seeing your fighter and seeing what they're doing, and having that extra time gives you the time where you see these big knockouts get set up, or you see these big victories happen. Like I mean, of course there's people that go out and throw jumping knees and knock people out in 10 seconds, but realistically that doesn't happen very often. So you have to go out there, use that extra time wisely, use it to catch your breath, or to get better position, or to work on whatever it is that you're working on at that time. But it's the extra time just allows you to get in there, understand your opponent, understand yourself. And I think that it helps a lot. I think it's not going to be a problem. My cardio is feeling great right now, so the extra time is not going to be a hindrance on me. My opponent's already fought pro fights, as you said, so I've watched him. He doesn't seem to slow down, and neither am I. So it's definitely going to be action packed. So make sure you tune in, or if you want tickets, hit me up on Instagram. Buy them through me.
Yes, that's great. That's always something to point out. It's super important for fans. Sometimes fans don't realize how important it is to buy tickets directly from fighters, and sometimes from gyms. Sometimes gyms also support the fighters. But yeah, reach out. to Gunnar Spain on Instagram to buy tickets from him. That always goes a long way to helping the fighter. I appreciate you being on the show. For everybody that's been watching, thanks for watching MMA Fancast with Luke Basin and our special guest and soon to be a pro MMA fighter as of March 3rd for Ring of Combat, Gunnar, the Real McCoy Spain. Thanks so much, Gunnar, for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you.